Hi, I'm Maria Lockwood, a reporter with the Superior Telegram. Welcome back to Archive Dive. Garden clubs bloomed in Superior for decades, beautifying the city and affecting change. Even today, their plantings and footprints can be found. The clubs kept their notes, addresses, newspaper clippings, and pictures in scrapbooks as colorful as the gardens they tended. Local historian Teddie Merenok has leafed through the books and studied their impact on the community. Thanks for being here today, Teddie.
Thank you, Maria.
Hi. So what era are we talking about for these garden clubs?
Well, the first garden club in Superior was formed in 1926.
1926.
And they run probably actively through the 1990s, I think. But if you really want to know where the garden clubs in Superior had their start, you actually have to go back to a man.
Oh.
The garden clubs were usually women. Mm-hmm. They did have a men's garden club in Superior, but the person who started these, and he started them in an interesting way. Well, it was part what he did himself, but it was also because he produced two daughters who were just as passionate about gardens and improving how Superior looked as their father was. He was Robert Kelly, and people may know his name because there is a Kelly Park in the north end of Superior.
Yes.
But he worked as the manager of the Land and River Improvement Company, which was the organization that was formed to actually build West Superior, what we know as downtown Superior now. And he managed that until he died. He was also involved in managing property for the investors from the East who had invested in Superior but didn't live here and didn't visit here, mm-hmm. but they owned property. And he came to Superior in the 1890s, and he lived until 1916. But one of his passions was the parks. And there had been a big push in the early 1890s to establish parks in Superior. And somehow, because of the fiscal panic that had taken hold of the country in 1893, all those plans had sort of gone by the wayside. So he came back in the late 1890s and put together a park commission that he was on. And it was through his efforts that Billings Park was established. And you try to think of Superior without Billings Park. And he made sure that it was a place that was used and accessible to everyone in Superior, even though the Superior Yacht Club had their clubhouse out there, and there was also a public bathing house for Superior too. Just the people who didn't belong to the yacht club, so it was accessible to everyone. And he instilled in his daughters this passion about parks and accessibility for everyone, that every part of Superior should have access to parks. So his two daughters, Faith and Mabel, organized the first garden club in Superior in 1926. There were 13 women initially, mm-hmm. and the 13 women who attended that day were told that for the next meeting they could bring along a friend. They were going to cap their enrollment at 30, but pretty soon it just blossomed, and so everybody in town wanted to belong to it. And I have to say I was surprised when I read this, but by 1939, Superior had the largest garden club in the state.
In the state?
In the state of Wisconsin.
How many?
At that time, I think there were almost 300 people.
Wow. All in one group.
Well, what happened was, when they decided that, you couldn't have 300 people in someone's house, is where they usually held their meetings, they decided to break down into auxiliaries. Mm-hmm. So they sort of organized along neighborhood lines, but sometimes not really. And the two garden clubs that really got my attention were the Iris Garden Club and the Peony, mostly because I live in the East End neighborhood, and these groups were from Central Park and East End. Mm-hmm. But also because the Iris Garden Club had donated to the public library where I worked their scrapbooks and all of their memorabilia from their years as an organization. And I would page through those, and I would just look at the wonderful photographs and all the activities that these women did. And that's what really got me interested in these garden clubs, and, just try to learn more about their history.
Mm-hmm. What are some of the things that they were involved in?
Well, when they organized, one of their goals was to get people interested in gardening, not only in their own yards, mm-hmm. but what public spaces look like. They were very interested in that. And there were two women in that original group who took a correspondence course on landscaping.
Wow.
So they would learn how to landscape not only yards but public places. And the group, the initial, the first garden club, which is referred to as the Superior Garden Club, but also the Central Garden Club, because they were the first ones and they were the ones that all the others sprang from.
Okay.
But they landscaped places like Central High School, and they did East High School, the courthouse, area around the courthouse. They did parks. Mm-hmm. They provided landscaping for these places in Superior.
Wonderful. And
then one of the auxiliary groups took as their special project was to organize and promote a wildflower garden out in Billings Park.
Oh.
At that time it was called Pokagamuk Park, which I did not know, but they were trying to get every kind of wildflower that was native to Wisconsin and planted out there.
Did they succeed?
I believe they did.
That would have been a garden to see.
Right. Yeah, I don't think it exists any longer, but that was one of their goals, was to do that.
Didn't they also push for better overseeing of the parks?
Yes. Yeah, they were very concerned about that, and they were always worried about how things looked. And one of their other special projects was that they were always concerned about Wisconsin Point. Oh. Even early on, that this was something special that we had to take care of. And there are several instances of people going out there and planting trees, I suppose, to stop the erosion. Mm-hmm. And they were big tree promoters. They thought the perfect gift for Mother's Day mm-hmm. was to buy a birch tree and plant it in Superior, because they were so beautiful and they were native to northern Wisconsin, and why not do this? Mm-hmm. And then the other thing they were very interested in was getting children interested in gardening, and they sponsored clubs at all the schools where they would go in, after school when they had their club meetings, and they would teach kids about gardening. And, they felt that they were grooming another generation mm-hmm. to take their place after they were gone.
Right. Yeah. Were they instrumental in getting a park supervisor in the city?
Well, there was no park board at the time, and what these ladies did was they wanted to take it to referendum to organize another park board for Superior, and they needed 2,000 signatures to get it on as a referendum, and they collected them all, and it passed overwhelmingly. And so a park board was organized, and that was in existence until Superior went from mayor, city council form of government to a city manager, and then all the boards were disbanded.
Oh. So who was watching the parks then?
I don't know.
But that came back when administration flipped again?
Well, now there's actually a park department in Superior, so mm-hmm. yeah. And then the other thing they were, which of course I felt that really made me feel good, was that they were always concerned about the grounds at the public library. Uh-huh. In fact, I was telling you earlier about a thing that they were organizing for Central Park in September it was about 1955. They were going to have I don't know if you'd call it a garden show or mm-hmm. just a community meeting out there and invite the public, and all the proceeds that went from that, or that they earned during that, they were going to apply towards landscaping the public libraries, lawns, and gardens.
Awesome.
So...
Excellent. And these weren't just in Superior, right? These garden clubs spread throughout the county.
Right. There were garden clubs out in Bennett. There were garden clubs out in Parkland. And most of them did not stay affiliated with the Superior Garden Club. The one that did was Rockmount. They always stayed affiliated with the Superior Garden Club. The rest of them just were independent after that. And it's funny how every year they used to have in the beginning, it was a tea. The ladies mm-hmm. would if you were in the garden club, you were invited to the tea, and it was usually held in someone's home. Well, then the groups got so large that they couldn't do that anymore. So they went to a luncheon, and they would have it at the Android Hotel once a year. They would have speakers, and there would be awards and prizes and things, and it cost 50 cents for the lunch.
Ooh,
At
50
the Android,
cents.
yes. They were really big on get-togethers, and they were also, the other thing they promoted were flower shows.
Right. I've heard they had some pretty big flower shows.
They did. And in the beginning, one of the people who offered their space to the Superior Garden Club, the first garden show was T.J. Roth. He let the women display their exhibits in the department store.
Okay, Roth's department store.
Roth's department store.
What was the first prize?
It was a ton of coal.
To heat your house with, right?
Right. Very practical. But then it outgrew Roth's quickly. I think the next year, in fact, it was held in one of the automobile showrooms.
Oh, okay.
And eventually, when all the clubs joined together and had an annual garden show, it was out at the Tri-State, at that time, the Tri-State Fairgrounds, now the Head of the Lakes Fairgrounds. And they had what they called the Women's Building, and that's where the garden show was held.
Okay.
But individual clubs also had their own garden shows, and I think the most spectacular one, of course, was the Iris.
Because that was your...
That was in my territory, and it was also in the Onaway Club, which, is still standing. Although it's a private residence now, and anyone who lived in that area had certainly attended something at the Onaway Club. But the interesting fact about the Onaway is that membership was only open to women.
Oh, that's a role
Their
reversal.
family, their husbands could be but they couldn't be full members.
Their husbands could be their plus one, but
yeah,
not
that was, but they
full.
couldn't be a member. So
Okay.
it was, a woman's club, and every year they would sponsor the Iris show, and the only flowers on exhibit were irises.
Oh,
So, and even if you didn't belong to the club, but you grew irises, you could display them there.
okay.
And this was a big 2-day show. The best thing about it was you never knew when the irises were going to bloom.
Because they're, yes, you can't.
Yes, because this is Superior, and it could be 40 degrees in June. They usually wanted it in the middle of June, maybe towards the end, but they had to wait till the last minute before they could definitely tell the public which dates they were going to hold the show. And I've only seen black and white pictures of these, but the flowers are spectacular. I didn't know you could grow irises that big. And everything would be very elaborate about this. All the women would be dressed in their little flowered dresses, with a floral pattern on them. They would serve tea. And one year they had an exact replica of one of the members' yards and gardens. They had their house there. They made a little miniature house and an exact replica of the whole garden around the house. It was amazing. And it was just for 2 days. That's when it was on display, were the 2 days of the show.
Wow.
And then the Peony Garden Club, which was from East End, they would also have a show at First Presbyterian Church.
Okay.
But you could kind of gauge when, peonies were going to come into bloom, and they
Not like
last
irises.
a little longer than the irises do.
Okay.
Yeah, but that must have been nail biting every year, thinking, when are we going to have this show this year? How can we advertise it? Yeah.
Right. Speaking of the Iris Club, you have their old club books, right, at
Right.
the library. And you went on a little expedition driving around your neighborhood once, didn't you?
I did, because every year they would put out like a membership booklet, and it would also have a calendar in it of events. But they would list every member's name and the address and their old phone numbers, which I thought was so cute. And so I've been working, even though I've retired from the library, I work there once a week with another retired librarian, and we're going through the archives and organizing and cataloging things that, that haven't been touched for years. And one of these was the collection of scrapbooks that we had from the different flower clubs. So I would take them home and organize everything. And I sort of fixated on these little booklets, and I thought, and I would look at the pictures and I would think how much work these women put into these gardens, and this is more than 50 years ago. Were any of them left? Of course, all these ladies have passed on. And so I wrote down all the addresses, and I went around the neighborhood, and I was looking for irises, and I did find them in some of the strangest places. there was a lady who lived by the old Church of the Redeemer, and she had this magnificent garden. And there's nothing left in the yard there's not even a tree hardly that is from her garden. But I looked across the street, and in front of the house, these beautiful irises, and I thought, I bet she talked the neighbors into taking those.
Okay, so those irises are still popping up in the neighborhood.
They are, and I'm going to go on another expedition this summer. Yeah.
Okay.
And the other funny thing I found when I was looking through these little booklets is that Robert Kelly's daughters, Mabel Stratton and Faith Kennedy, lived across from each other on 5th Street after they were married. And so now I know their addresses. I'm going to look this summer and see if there are gardens there yet, too.
Excellent.
I mean, some of these people you can't even imagine how beautiful they were. The other thing is that the Telegram in the 1950s published a column. It was called Garden Gems, that people from different garden clubs would write topics about growing flowers in the North, because they said we were often overlooked by other publications. People did not know, how to grow. They didn't think anything grew in northern Wisconsin. So why even write about it? But so the Telegram would publish that. And also in the 1950s, they had a thing called Garden of the Week.
Oh.
And there was a sign. The Evening Telegram chose this Garden of the Week. You could put it in your yard, and then they would go out and take a picture and write a story about the garden and whoever was the gardener in the family.
Neat.
That I would love to have those pictures. They're beautiful. Yeah.
Okay. There was something about tulip bulbs that you talked about.
Right. Yeah, the city had gotten 1,000 tulip bulbs from a company. I don't remember which one it was, but obviously a tulip company. And so they gave them to the gardeners, and they planted them all around the city. And,
what year was this?
Oh, I can't remember the year, but it was so funny that they talked about when they had bloomed, and they would say, well, there were a couple kids, who had been making mischief, but we took care of that. Nobody was going to pick their tulips. They were on guard, yeah. But 1,000 tulip bulbs is a lot. It's a lot, yeah.
All over the city, huh?
Yeah. It's surprising how many times they did that, would, like set up gardens. But I think the thing that I think about most and that I regret is gone are the boulevards that ran along Hammond Avenue and Grand Avenue. And the Kelly sisters, Mabel and Faith, were involved in those, and they planted trees on those boulevards. Their father had been like a promoter of them, and when they planted trees on them, they had a bottle that on a piece of paper, they wrote the names of everybody who was involved in the garden club, and in doing this and buying the trees and having them planted, and they put it in the bottle and they buried it under the roots of the trees. So I don't know when they dug up the boulevards in the 60s that if anybody ever found that. If anybody's listening to this and they know, I would love to know the answer to that question. Did you find it? Yeah.
Neat.
So
excellent. So these garden clubs were not just a way to promote gardening, but a way for these women to connect and socialize and affect change in the community.
Right. And, really, when you think about it, I've seen this happen so many times. You see someone in a neighborhood that fixes up their yard and starts planting flowers, and pretty soon the house next to them does it, and then across the street. And I think that's what these ladies had set out to do. They loved these flowers. They loved gardening, and they just wanted everybody to enjoy it as much as they did. And I mean, when you look at their gardens, I wish I could do that. I mean, it's amazing, and it had to be catchy, like, oh, I want some of that too, I want my yard to look like that. And maybe people hesitated up here too because of the weather.
Right.
Like, can I actually do this? And Mr. Roth proved that was true, and they just continued with that. Can I grow this in northern Wisconsin? And don't we appreciate it even more because our growing season is so short?
We do.
We do.
Are there any of those garden clubs left? Can any of our current garden clubs or groups trace their ancestry back to the Superior Garden Club?
I don't know if they can, if there's an actual line back, But there are garden clubs. I mean, all you have to do is look at Farallon to see, that garden clubs are alive and well because they take care of those gardens. There's the Lake Superior Gardeners, and then there's the Lake Superior Master Gardeners. And I know they do that around town. That that's what they do is promote and help take care of public gardens.
Right.
So it's still alive and well. I just think, things have changed for women.
Mm-hmm.
In the early days, most women did not work outside the home, and so they had more time. But they put that time to good use, didn't they?
Yes, they did.
What could be better than making your town beautiful? But now we don't have as much time, do we?
No, we don't. There were a lot of different clubs back then. There were different groups who...
Oh, my gosh. Everything. The Shakespeare Browning Club. When I first started working at the library, the Shakespeare Browning Club met there. Yes. Yeah. Well, literature and promoting that. There was a community theater in those days. There were just so many organizations, sororities, not, sororities of working women and things like that, too, that met. It's amazing what this project that I've been doing at the library, how my eyes have been opened to all these things that I really didn't think that women got this involved in. There was also a music group, I wish I could remember the name, and they provided scholarships for music students, raised the money to do that. They had performances in town. So they were always trying to improve the community in some way. That was their job to do that. If they didn't work outside the home, that was their job.
Right.
They did a lot of things that we have to be, really thankful for. And then there were things like the Superior Skating Club, where women met once a week to go ice skating. I'm sure, leave the kids with a babysitter and then go ice skating. And that went on for years and years and years. It was just the idea of getting together with other women and talking. I suppose that was a big thing about it, and socializing and having a cup of coffee with someone and a donut or a piece of cake.
Or lunch. Didn't the Iris Club used to meet at
the Peony Club met.
Peony Club met.
When I was a librarian at the East End Library, the Peony Club met there, and they would always bring me up a lunch tray on this little tray. It was fabulous. They were such good cooks. I would never have been able to belong to their organization, but they were. I mean, and I look back at that, and it's just, isn't it sweet? Isn't it? I don't know, it reminds me of that generation so much. They're all gone now. And they were always seemed like they were doing something for someone else, for the betterment of the community, because they landscaped the yard at East End around the library.
Okay.
And they planted bridal wreath, which were just glorious when they came into bloom. So they were always thinking about us. And they also did, and I even remember this when the library moved from Hammond Avenue to where it is now, that the garden club that was still in existence in the early 1990s, they would come in and do flower arrangements, and they would be on display for a few days at the library. And they did this, the library was always sort of a place for them where they could do flower arrangements and, leave their arrangements there for the public to enjoy. They always raised money to buy books for the library about gardening. And they were also, and I found this interesting because we are so concerned now with planting gardens that attract birds and wildlife and bees. Even then they were promoting that. And they were promoting, one year they had a contest where people could bring in birdhouses, and they put them on display at the Superior Water Light and Power Building that was on Tower Avenue. And they would anybody could bring them in. If they had built a birdhouse, they would bring them in and put them on display. But they were really, really concerned about that and wanted to inform people about what they could do to attract birds and wildlife to their gardens. We always think of it as sort of a new thing, don't we?
Yes.
That in the last few years that people have gotten more concerned about butterflies and bees and all of that, but these ladies were doing it back in the 1920s.
That's neat.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Teddie.
You're welcome, Maria.
This has been fun.
It has.
And thanks for listening to Archive Dive. New episodes are available monthly at superiortelegram.com or wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you have a topic you'd like us to explore, email me at mlockwood@superiortelegram.com.